What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Juicy Jet podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Rooney, and we are back. I'm actually out here in London recording because I had to jump on after we finally saw our new era of Jets leadership actually talk to the media in person in their introductory press conference. So Aaron, Glenn, and Darren Mougey, both together with Woody Johnson in front of former players. I think there was a current player in the crowd, the media, coaches, and then of course it was streamed online for the fans to see as well. So very exciting time in Jets land. And first, what we're going to do today is talk a little bit about what they each said, maybe some of my reactions to some of the things that they said, and then maybe hit on some of the things that they need to do in the next couple days and weeks in order to get this offseason started and this team ready to rock and roll throughout this offseason. But first, before we start, just remember this was only a press conference. I have a very firm belief that you can not really win a like you can do well in a press conference. That does not mean that someone's going to be a really great coach or a really great GM. But I do strongly believe that you can lose a press conference. And there is one moment that stands out in my mind that every Jets fan should remember because it was made fun of for forever. We all knew that Adam Gase was a bad hire. Before the press conference even happened, we were not happy that we got Adam Gase. And then you go into the press conference and you see his eyes bugging out, looking all over the place, and you were like, holy cow, this is going to be a disaster. And then guess what? It was 2 years of a disaster. So like I said, I don't think doing well in a press conference means that you're going to be a great coach or a great GM. But if you lose a press conference, you lose the fans. People start to question some of the things that you're doing. And it's just like, wow, is this guy ever going to be able to lead a team? And if you look at Adam Gase, he hasn't returned to the NFL since. So, like I said, let's not put too much stock into it, but let's talk a little bit about why this was really exciting. So first, Woody Johnson gets up to introduce both Aaron Glenn and Darren Mougey. Now, Woody gets up. It looks like he has never prepared for this before in his life. It's like he forgot that this was happening and just strolled up to the podium and started talking. So once again, this is a common theme. The less Woody talks, the better it's going to be for the fans and for the team in general. So that was a very interesting way to start off the conversation, but he was very positive. He was very complimentary of the two candidates and all the other candidates that were interviewed. He said some good things about the 33rd team, which helped find these candidates. Side note, I could have told him that Aaron Glenn was a good candidate on my own. They didn't really need the 33rd team for that. Darren Mougey, I will give them credit for because that's a up-and-comer that, maybe we would have talked about, but not one that would have stood out initially as a great GM candidate. But Woody goes through his talk track and basically introduces the two of them. Talked about some of the key factors like authenticity, leadership qualities that he cared about, accountability, things like that. And he was confident in the two about how they stood out in the interview process. From there, he hands it off to Darren Mougey. Mougey was also, first of all, huge. Like we said, 6'6". He looked massive behind the podium. But he gets up there, he talks a little bit about team building, emphasizing the drafting, developing, and retaining talent that we have. And he wants to create that sustainable model for long-term success. Now, he was a little bit more, I don't know how you would put it. He was more scripted, I would say. Like, he had his paper that he was reading off of. He's not the motivational type that you would get from an Aaron Glenn, for example. But I thought some of the things he said were really good. I think he called out Aaron Glenn a bunch about how they would align. And he called out this really great story he had about Aaron Glenn, which, when he was with the Broncos, he was on the interview committee for their new head coach. And of course, they hired none other than Nathaniel Hackett. But Aaron Glenn was in for an interview. And Darren Mougey asked him, what does your first meeting look like in front of the team? And most people would get up there and just explain like, oh, this is what it would look like. I would probably say something about XYZ topics. And what Aaron Glenn does is says, do you want me to play it out? And he stands up and actually delivers the speech that he would give at the first team meeting, which Mougey said he never forgot, and it stood out as something that was very motivating for him. So it felt like he knew that they were going to work together one day. Maybe not as a GM or a head coach, but he felt that Aaron Glenn was a good candidate, and eventually he should get his turn at head coach. So I thought that was really interesting to see that connection formed a couple of years ago, and now playing out as partners that are going to lead this team. So I liked what Darren Mougey said. He definitely wasn't the highlight of this press conference, though. The highlight overall winner of this press conference, and no surprise, was Aaron Glenn. Aaron Glenn just got up there with a confidence that he's going to be a leader. Like, that's it. And when he stood up in front of that room, you could feel it. And he's only he's a small guy, but you could tell he packs a punch. So he came in, talked a little bit about how he was the former Jets cornerback drafted, and how excited he was to be back with the team. He talked a little bit about how he felt like he was living a dream, where he started his career in the NFL as a New York Jet cornerback. He started his career in scouting as a New York Jet scout, and now he's hoping to start his head coaching career and finish his head coaching career as a New York Jets head coach. So he's hoping to stay here for a really long time, which was really cool to see. And it was really exciting to see a lot of the former players in the front row watching him. Like I saw Wayne Corbett there. Um, Rob Carpenter was there. Nick Mangold, Tony Richardson. There was a ton of people. Leon Washington was there. So it was cool to see some of the throwback players getting, supporting him, whether it was as a player, whether it was when he was a scout and part of the organization, or they're just supporting the Jets as a whole. I thought that was really cool, and it makes him feel like he's one of us. Once again, I think that's what makes Aaron Glenn stand out. Another thing he was very clear about is that this is the job that he wanted. He walked into that second interview saying, "I'm not leaving without a contract," which I thought was awesome to hear, because one of the reasons why we liked Rex Ryan is Rex was somebody who would come in and say, "I have unfinished business. I love the Jets. I'm going to coach the Jets to bring them to a championship." Unfortunately, he didn't know how to put staff together. So he probably walked into his meeting saying, "I'm the guy for it." And Woody said, "Who's your staff going to be?" And he said, "I don't know. I'll tell you when the plan's figured out." Well, Aaron Glenn has a plan, and he's actually involved in the game still, unlike Rex Ryan, who has been out of the league for 10 years. So I loved hearing that he wanted this job. He said all other jobs, while he entertained a lot of conversations, this was the one he wanted and the one he was the most excited about. So that was super exciting to hear. And then finally, he had this remark that just got every Jets fan hyped up. It's probably going to be put on T-shirts. It's going to be one of the most overemphasized quotes that you'll hear out of a press conference. It was, "Put your seatbelts on and get ready for the ride. Listen, there's going to be some challenges, but with challenges comes opportunity. But here's what I do know. We're the freaking New York Jets, so we're built for this. S." So that got people fired up. And I think it's something that just shows his passion and excitement for being a part of this Jets organization. Now, finally, the last thing that Aaron Glenn talked a little bit about was, actually, there was a couple more things. Number one, his relationship with Bill Parcells. He loves Bill Parcells. Says he's the guy that pushed him into scouting, which we originally talked about on our Aaron Glenn podcast. Because what he did was say, "You want to be a head coach? You're not starting in coaching. You're starting in scouting." And Aaron Glenn said, "I don't want to." He said, "Too bad." Because the people who understand the evaluation portion of being a head coach are the ones who are going to be the most successful. And if you remember back in the day, Bill Parcells was known for being one of the coaches that was also in charge of all roster decisions. I think the thing he said, I think his famous quote is, "If you want me to cook the meal, you got to let me shop for the groceries." And I think that was his mindset in teaching Aaron Glenn to go do the scouting part of this job. And you won't find many head coaches who have both the evaluation and coaching part of their background. So that was great for Aaron Glenn. Then he also brought up another Jets throwback, which I was not expecting at all. It kind of came out of nowhere. But he mentioned that every summer he goes to hang out with Al Groh. Al Groh was a former head coach of the New York Jets for one season. I think he was the one who immediately followed Bill Belichick when he quit. And he was only the coach for a year. We went 9-7, and then he just left the Jets and went to go coach West Virginia out of nowhere. So I was not expecting to see Aaron Glenn or hear Aaron Glenn talk about Al Groh, but I thought that was really interesting that he has more ties to head coaches or previous head coaches that he gets advice from. So I thought that was really interesting, and a nice shout out to Al Groh, who you don't hear his name very often in Jets history. So that was cool. Then the last piece that I think we can talk about here is Aaron Rodgers obviously came up a few times, and Aaron Glenn was very clear. He came out right away and said, "We have contacted Aaron Rodgers. We are currently in the evaluation process of what we want to do with him. We'll have conversations with him and decide sooner rather than later because we don't want it to linger." I personally don't have any indication of what that means in terms of whether Aaron's going to come back or not. I'm leaning more and more every day that he might actually come back, which is pretty crazy. But the financial part of his contract is the thing that's holding me back. And I feel like we don't have anyone on the staff yet that can determine whether the finances are going to make it a good move or a bad move. So that's going to be on Darren Mougey to find some folks to fill his staff out with on the financial side of the business, not just the evaluation side. So that was the majority of the press conference. There were a couple other like small interviews that they gave with members of the Jets media, with some more beat reporters, but that was primarily what happened. And I would say Aaron Glenn gets you excited. He's just so passionate in the way he talks about the team. It was just exciting to see, and it's great because even if you didn't like Aaron Glenn, you need something to be motivated by to get you to watch this team going into next year. So having someone like Aaron Glenn get you pumped up a little bit and say all those great things about the New York Jets, it's motivating for sure. So like I said, we will not know what they're actually going to be like until we see them on the field, but he didn't lose the press conference, which is the one thing that we were worried about. Don't lose. And he didn't lose, which is great. Now from here on out, there's a couple things that are going to happen over the next couple days that are going to be really important to this team. Number one, we just talked about Darren Mougey filling out the rest of his staff. So what does that mean? When you think about a team like the Detroit Lions, for example, their first-time GM, Brad Holmes, actually brought in some more senior guys to surround him so that he had someone on the evaluation side, he had someone on the finance side that could help him. So I think that was really important to the success of the Lions. So when I think about the Jets, it's who are we going to bring in that's going to help us to also make sure that we're, not just making decisions out of nowhere with a young GM that has never done something like this before. Who's going to be our advisor on that side that's going to help Darren to make the right decisions? So I'm very interested to see if they bring in anybody with some sort of experience. And then on Aaron's side, it's time to fill out the coaching staff. So they're going to be doing interviews with offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators, special teams coaches over the next couple of days, and then building out that staff below it. There's still a lot of rumors swirling about who that could possibly be, but we're just not sure yet. I think Nick Caley is the big one coming out of the Rams that I think people would really love. We'll see if we can get him. I think he's also interviewing with Tampa Bay, so we'll see how that goes. Steve Wilks still looks like the front runner for defensive coordinator, which I think would bring an experienced former coach in the building. Has he been the best defensive coordinator over the past couple of years? Not really, but I need someone to help be an advisor for Aaron Glenn, and he can help run the defense. Oh, also one thing, Aaron Glenn said he will not be calling plays on the defensive side. He wants to just be a head coach, which is great. And then finally, special teams coordinator. It looks like Chris Banjo is the leader in the clubhouse, with Mike Westhoff being an advisor in the summer. I don't think he's coming out of retirement. So looks like those are the front runners here. We'll see how it all goes, though. Over the next couple of days, we should get a lot of movement on that front because there's a lot of scouting that needs to happen over the next couple of weeks. There's the Senior Bowl, a bunch of all-star games going on from the college ranks. We're going to have the Combine in mid-February. So there's a lot happening. And then pro days. So we got to get moving here with both Aaron Glenn and Darren Mougey. But overall, great press conference. Very excited about the future of the team. Looking forward to seeing who their staffs are going to be and what decisions they make going forward with an Aaron Rodgers, with other members of our organization. Are we going to pull in any people from the Detroit Lions or the Denver Broncos that they've worked with in the past? That'll be part of their free agency strategy. We don't know yet, but we'll see. There's going to be a lot up in the air over the next couple of weeks, and we should start to get some answers. So once again, great press conference. Very excited for the team and looking forward to what's going to happen over the next couple of weeks. Thank you all for listening to another episode of the Juicy Jet Podcast, and I will talk to y'all soon. Ciao.